welcome. We're so excited to have you. And we are really happy to be wrapping up our Data Horizons series with a fantastic panel on data and AI in financial services. So, my name is Sadie St. Lawrence. I'm the founder and CEO of Women in Data. And if this is your first time in a Women in Data meeting, we say welcome. Women in Data is a diverse community of data leaders, practitioners, and our mission is to increase diversity in data careers. So, we are a global community. We do love to connect with events online so that everyone can join in from whatever part of the world they are in. And we have representation in 60 plus countries. So happy that you could join us today virtually. And we encourage you to get connected locally with one of our chapters as well. If this is your first time, again, just a little bit about our community. One of the things we love to say is all are welcome. We share our knowledge through sessions like this, where we get to hear from fantastic panelists who have taken the time to share their knowledge with us. But most importantly, we cheer each other on, we are accountable, and we lead and create opportunities to lead. So there's lots of ways to get involved. I encourage you to definitely join us. And if you're currently a Women in Data member, welcome back. It's always great to see you, to see familiar faces, and looking forward to the conversation that we have today. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our panel for today, and I am going to hand it over to our moderator for this session, Aisha. You've probably seen Aisha around. Aisha is heavily involved in Women in Data, and she leads our executive data forum. She'll probably tell you a little bit more about that as well. But without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Aisha, so you can introduce our fantastic panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining. I'm Aisha Acquaintance. As Sadie mentioned, I chair the Executive Data Forum. Essentially, what that is the executive chapter for Women in Data. So across the globe, as you saw, with 50,000 plus communities for the CDOs and VPs and the trailblazers within the space, we created a chapter that's really focused on creating a community and a kind of personal board of advisors, if you will, for that group. And so if you're interested at all, you can apply on to the Executive Data Forum through the app right now. We're always looking for new members. It's growing like wildfire. And we do get together every couple of months in a Executive Data Forum to discuss kind of the issues at hand, as well as getting together at events and conferences throughout the globe as we travel. So please reach out to me if you have any questions or apply directly through the app. I'm always looking for new great members to join us. Wonderful. So today I'm so excited as I reached out to this community to find speakers to talk about AI in finance. With me today, I have Maya. And Maya is the CEO and founder of Savvy AI. It's the first turnkey AI machine learning tool that makes it easy for businesses to quickly and cost effectively leverage the power of AI to supercharge their operations and profitability. Maya has been a featured speaker and expert in outlets such as Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journals, CNBC, Forbes, goes on and on. We are really excited to have her on the panel with us. And then we have Funke Bishi, who is the Associate Director for Data and Business Analyst at the Royal Bank of Canada for Capital Markets. She's in Canada right now with a strong background in finance, risk management, data management. She's an active member of the Enterprise Data Management Council, the EDM Council, and that's a global association that promotes data as well. And she holds a degree in accounting and finance and a master's in business administration. And then finally, we have Harshini from Snorkel AI, not too far from me down the street here in Menlo Park, Bay Area. She's the director of business operations and growth at Snorkel AI, a company that's been helping enterprise build cutting edge data centric AI solutions. But prior to Snorkel, she was at Microsoft and most recently a part of the Azure Identity, where she helped companies move from legacy solutions to more modern cloud based offerings, and has a tremendous background and career in data as well. So we could not be more thrilled to have these folks representing the data leaders within the space, which is our goal in the Executive Data Forum, really to increase diversity within the data leadership role. So, with that, I will pose my first question out to the group. As you know, that we're talking today about the unique challenges that financial institutions face when integrating AI technologies and accelerate fairness of financial services. Tell me, team, what do you think is one of the biggest concerns today with AI and financial services? I'll start with you, Maya.
There's several concerns. I mean, the first one is financial services are a regulated industry. So they can't just jump into every new technology trend that other businesses might be able to jump into, even if they see the value in that trend, because they have to be accountable for for laws, regulations, that kind of framework. So I think their biggest concern right now is just wrapping their head around what can they do that's within the boundaries of regulation. Even if you're not in the US, you're still subject to regulatory and data privacy laws like GDPR, et cetera. So they're trying to figure out what can they do, how can they follow the law, but yet use this really, really powerful tool. And how can they control it? I mean, banking and finance is all about de-risking a situation, and AI can be fraught with risk and inaccuracy. So they're still trying to wrap their brain around all of that at the same time.
Anything to add, Harshini?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a big one. I would actually think about the concerns in kind of three different buckets. I would say the first one is reputational. And I think, I guess not ordered, but like, another one of them is reputational, which is, you know, there's a risk of inadvertently distributing, confidential material if you're not careful about how you are deploying these systems. So we saw that happen with Samsung, or if you deploy something that's not yet mature and is kind of inconsistent with your brand, that's a huge reputational risk. But at the same time, kind of thinking about, what you were saying about the regulations, Maya, and your strategy, I'd say another bucket is strategically. So how do you move quickly enough to stay competitive but slowly enough to ensure that you're operating with high quality and being mindful of all these regulations. And I think the third one is exactly what Maya was saying, just, regulatory restrictions and legal restrictions. So, are your strategies resilient to the changes that might come down the line? And how do you make sure that you're building consciously of all the regulations that exist now as well?
Exactly. And we'll dig into kind of how we can overcome some of that. But Funky, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, sure. I agree with Maya and Harshni around the regulatory piece. And then for me, another thing that comes to mind, which is kind of also very key, is data quality, which is kind of close to what I do on a day-to-day basis. Like we all do, AI solutions, technology heavily rely on high quality data to perform accurate analysis and decision making. And financial institutions are actually facing a lot of DQ issues. Of course, there has been a lot of effort that has been put in place, both in the past and currently, to fix some of these issues. But basically, this data quality issue still introduces a risk around the adoption of AI because if the data that is used to train an AI model, for example, is inaccurate, it's actually going to compromise the accuracy of the result of these models and then potentially lead to probably customer dissatisfaction or loss of revenue. And then thinking about that and trying to cite an example, say, for example, we have an AI powered chatbot that is being developed to increase personalization of services to customers. And then maybe one of the functionalities of that bot is to send maybe a birthday wish to to customers on their birthdays. And then for some reason, at the point of onboarding the customer, somebody missed entering the date of birth of the customer or probably entered the wrong one. That's actually an example of the data quality issue. What will happen is that that customer either doesn't get a birthday notification, which is part of what we were expecting that the chatbot to actually deliver, and then maybe it actually sent it, but sending it on the wrong day. This is going to be kind of thinking of it from a branding perspective. It's not going to be good for that particular organization. And also thinking about it from an income perspective. Let's imagine a situation where the bank has a product offering for a particular a range of customer within the same region, and then this particular customer falls within this age range, what happens is that this offering is not going to be communicated to the customer. And then who knows how about if the customer eventually wants to buy into that offering? And with the case, data quality, the customer is not able to buy into the offering, and that's going to lead to a loss of revenue to the organization. So basically, poor data quality severely impacts the adoption of AI systems. There has been a lot of framework that is being implemented, like I said, to effectively address these issues, but it's kind of ongoing. It's not like 100% done.
Right. And so let's dig into that. When you talk about how I'm sure that's part of the reason that many of you joined. I know in the executive data forum and talking to CDOs every month about these challenges, I'm hearing like you all that they're getting a lot of pressure. And you mentioned the reputation being key, but they're getting pressure, especially in the data leader role, to say, well, what are you doing about this? How are we implementing ChatGPT tomorrow? What's our plan? And we were talking about this in our last forum that some of that in the past it used to be that you all needed to know the answer, right? You're the CDO, we hired you. What are we doing? But now we can kind of flip the script a little bit. The way somebody described it recently was that you're opening up the conversation to pull business and everyone else in because we're all starting from the same place now. Because a lot of this newer AI functionality kind of happened to everyone, and so the CDO is not necessarily supposed to be the expert on something brand new. So it's an opportunity where in the past, maybe you were supposed to be the expert on something to tell your plan. Now to say, well, how do we want to bring this into the organization? And how can we let me go back and become an expert on some of the new tools that are add-ons to say a chat GPT, and let's discuss the risk and rewards for each together and where we want to delve into further. And I thought that was a really good point, that we're not in this alone as data leaders, and we don't need to take on the risk in our personal reputation alone by choosing the wrong, hyped up tool of the day, but we can really welcome the rest of business in. Are you all seeing the same things, and how are, besides collaborating with the rest of the team, what other ways are you easing some of these concerns? Go for it, Maya.
Sure. I think what we really need to do, and what I've been talking to finance leaders about at the executive level, is developing a framework. And developing a framework where they bring multiple stakeholders into the discussion. Exactly what you're saying, Aisha. This isn't just an IT issue. This isn't just a CDO issue. This is an organizational issue, because AI transformation is not going away. This is going to be the biggest trend we've seen since digital transformation, which took banks over a decade or two to get through. So the first thing we have to think about is an external framework and an internal framework. We have to also think about our internal teams. We talked about external risks like reputational, legal, but let's talk about internal risks. Let's talk about bringing stakeholders together that can discuss how, best practices, what kind of data is acceptable? What are use cases that are acceptable for using AI, and what kind of data? Harshini exactly pointed out the Samsung use case. They didn't tell their employees, no, you can't put our super confidential chip data into ChatGPT in order to QA your work. Like, I know that seems really obvious to us as data leaders, but it's not obvious to people on the ground. These LLMs and these ChatGPTs have created almost an easy button for certain types of work tasks. So people are going to want to use them. So now let's arm them with best practices on how to use them. But let's also bring in stakeholders from HR, because it's going to affect the workforce. And in that teams can be upskilled, certain tasks can be automated. Certain jobs may find some change and transformation. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, just like when computers came into the workforce. It seemed scary at first, but then it actually opened up more jobs and more opportunities. So that's when I talk about like a multidimensional conversation with stakeholders. It's not just about how we're going to use this externally. It's about how we're going to grow with this and use this internally.
Yeah, and I'm happy to kind of piggyback on that. I think a couple of things that you were mentioning that I was really thinking about. So when you were saying that this is really an organizational problem, I think, or an organizational issue, I think one comparison I heard that I really liked in the past was that, it's kind of like when email came out, right? Like that's not an IT problem. That's not just going to impact the IT team. It impacts how the entire company works. Every single person will be changing how they interact on a daily basis because of it. And it feels like we're kind of in a moment like that again. And so this is where, to your point, there's a lot of education needed across the entire company. There's a lot of planning and how you want to roll out, what you want to roll out first. And in addition, again, it's not just like IT things that are being tweaked, right? Like it's not a data team's issue. This is something that, McKinsey was saying that some of the latest developments have the opportunity to unlock $1 trillion of value in the financial sector alone, right? That is massive. That means that this is something that everybody at the leadership team should be involved in looking at where those opportunities to unlock value are coming from, how you prioritize those against the concerns that we said so that you're rolling out in a very intentional way. This is really a chance for the entire leadership team to come together and figure out your path forward. And so I think, back to your original question, Aisha, I think we are seeing leadership members across different functions all coming together to really chart this course out because of the immense change and opportunity that it presents.
Funky, I'll come to you, and I want to also add in because I've heard this a lot lately. How are you getting? It sounds like you've had some success in getting business leaders involved, but I've also heard from other people that they're getting the we want this now, but it's your problem. Go figure it out. And so, how do you bring them along for the ride so that they don't see it as because they can't have their cake and eat it too, right? They can't say go implement the newest technology, but I don't want to be part of it. But I have seen that like, isn't that your role as a data leader is to figure that piece out? I don't want to be part of the risk. But to your point, it's so much more than a data problem. It's a business initiative that can affect people. So I'm curious, and please, audience, I can see that Denise asked for any questions in the Q&A. Please, please, please give us your questions because I want to make sure to answer them. But that's one I get a lot of times, which is how can I get other people in the organization to care about finding the right solution for us, not just telling me what they want. And that's been a challenge. But Funky, anything over to you to add?
Yeah, sure. I think I kind of agree with the points that I raised. And then I'm thinking about it from the data leader's perspective. I think managing the change management piece is also very key. Aside from training, I think naturally there's this cultural concern. Like, for example, when ChatGPT came out, I see a lot of communication across. Like, people were kind of scared around, oh, this is going to be result into job displacement, and then also managing this. Some people have the perception that, oh, I don't think machines can ever work like humans. Like all of this is kind of going on the background. And then in as much as we try to come up with all of those policies and framework, which is very, very good, it's also kind of good to also manage and help the organization as a whole. Like you've all mentioned, it's not just a business of one person. It's an organization thing. All partners within the organization needs to be involved. So helping everybody kind of manage that change and transition effectively is very, very important and key.
I agree. And one of the interesting parts that we were talking about in prepping for this conversation is the behavioral style that's needed to drive that change. And as you all have heard me say before, if you follow any executive data forum posts, is in the last year or two, it's really been about being a change agent and an evangelist, right? That are being said as the number one skills for a data leader right now. And so I find that fascinating because I still talk to people with imposter syndrome that they don't have the right technical background to be a data leader, yet they are amazing at bringing people along for the ride of their vision and collaboration and getting business to understand the value and adopt into their plan. And that I've been saying for 2 years is equally as important, if not more. Well, now with this, I really feel strongly that uh, there's no choice anymore. I think Harshini said it best for a competitive advantage. You've got to get on board with this. So I'm here now as your data leader that's been welcoming you to part of the conversation to see how we can do that. And so that skill set that not everybody has, right? That is the collaborative nature of bringing people along and joining the conversation is I think more than ever needed right now. I do see that skill set across many of our female data leaders. I know that we don't all have the same behavioral background, as you can even tell by this call. Sometimes we get told that with more male characteristic traits, if you will, to dominating and making things happen. And so I don't really even want to make it a gender thing when I talked about the behavioral style so much as if you can identify with those softer skill sets that can really help in bringing people along and collaborate. That's really needed right now in that data leadership role. So I feel like now is the time more than ever to drive that diversity with different behavioral styles into the role. Have you all noticed anything about that, or how would you add on to that piece?
I would just say first thing first is we have to normalize that you don't have to know linear algebra to use AI.
Right.
And I know many of the folks on this call may know linear algebra, and that's awesome. But we have to start talking about AI as a tool that more people can use. Because the way AI has been discussed in the last 10 years has been almost in wizardry terms. You know, you have to have these magicians called data scientists, and they go off over there and then they conjure on your data lake and things come out of it. And it's like, this mysticism around AI needs to stop because we are now in the maturity curve where this is now a practical tool that can be used by multiple teams within an enterprise. And part of it is we have to change the language of how we are talking about AI. And we have to start bringing it down from the hyperbole to practical terms. And I think that will help organizational understanding and adoption when we stop talking about it as this incoming sentience that's about to take over humanity and talk about it as, hey, I want to increase my loan offer acceptance rates. And we have a decision tree here. Is there something we can do to make it better? And that is part of the organization, that kind of change in language that needs to happen at organizations for folks to get comfortable and for folks to feel included. Because by the way, and this has been my personal pet peeve, when you start talking about AI centers of excellence, which many organizations have, I'm not going to call anyone out. When you start talking about AI centers of excellence, what does that say to the rest of your organization? That you're not excellent? That AI is not for you? That it should be siloed by only certain people that can use it? I mean, really up-leveling your organization means democratizing your language and your tools.
I mean, it's just mic drop on what you just said. I completely agree because people are scared of it. They are scared of it right now, and they don't know what they don't know. And so that behavioral trait that you just showed to break something down, to invite everybody into the conversation, that is the winning ticket. Think about how you make people feel at the end of the day. They want to work with you if they trust you and you don't make them feel stupid and you make them feel brought into the conversation. And I think for whoever's listening, that is so key. If you can do what she just did there, as opposed to making it this hidden thing that you do, right? We see this sometimes, like marketing, they make the magic happen. They don't necessarily tell us how, or in HR. And it used to be that way for CTOs, right? But now, and if you can be the data leader that's like, this is for all of us, and let me break it down. It's not that scary. We just have some decision points to make together. They're going to be excited to be able to be bought into the conversation, and that's where you're really directing them to give you buy-in to roll out your strategy ultimately, right? I'm going to read the chat for a second. Do you want to chime in, Funky or Harshimi as well, while I just answer some of these questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. No, go ahead, Ashley. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say kind of two other maybe concrete ways to go about what Maya was suggesting. I think one of them really is that, inviting other people to be thought partners with you. When people have shared an opinion, when people have weighed in on something, they become more invested in it. So by directly and pointedly asking people for feedback or to engage with you as you start thinking through these processes, that's one way to start lowering the barrier and bringing them in. Another example I read, I don't remember which company, but I know there was one company, for example, that encouraged every employee to go and play around a little bit with some of the new tools coming out. I don't know, exactly which one it was, but that was one way to encourage everyone to get over the fear of the unknown and start understanding a little bit more of what these tools are and how those can kind of come in and to become an owner in that decision and that rollout, which I thought was like a very novel way of really trying to bring the entire company in and help lower, again, if we're talking about demystifying it, getting people to get hands-on is one great way to do that. Fuke, I guess back to you. Thanks for letting me hop in.
Thanks, Ashley. I guess you both have covered it all. It's actually important. to involve everybody in the process. And collaboration is also very, very key. And I think you both touched on that because we all know that the idea of AI implementation and all of this is not just kind of just a, a coding or an algorithm thing. It's going to impact a lot of partners. We are going to have data scientists come into play. We are going to have even we need the domain owners in terms of the finance knowledge because without all of this, we can't achieve the overall objective. So I 100% agree around breaking down that boundary because, for example, somebody coming from a finance background and wants to work with a bunch of developers, if we really don't make it as simple as it is, sometimes very scary. I kind of agree with it. So I think talking about it from a holistic perspective and also understanding that we are all working to achieve a common objective is very, very vital.
I agree. And somebody anonymously commented, right, instead of actually upskilling the business units, instead encouraging silos and elitism, that's bad for the bottom line. And so it's true, right? Like what you were saying, Maya, like if that center of AI, that's where we can come in is really helping people not do this wrong. Like we have so many other things that have come our way, right? Like this is one that's like, do you want to keep it? Experts behind the closed doors in a room that make these decisions for the whole company for the next 50 years, or do we want to bring it into the organization? So I think that's absolutely great. A couple other questions that came in live here. How will chat GPT change banking and finance industry in particular? So maybe we could give some use cases. I know we've talked about that.
Harshini, actually, you start on this one.
So sounds good. Um, so I think there's definitely a lot of interest, as ChatGPT is coming out in terms of how to use that. I think the way that we're going to start seeing it play out in companies is quite varied. So I think one thing, and this is something that Circle feels very strongly about, and I think there's a lot of discussion about this, is that at the end of the day, the real value gets unlocked by also using your own proprietary information and data. And so using something like ChatGPT just out of the box is not going to get you the results that you want or need. So I think there are a couple of different ways that we will see this start to change the game. I think one way is just in terms of making people more aware of the opportunities that are out there, even if they don't adopt ChatGPT directly. For example, there's Bloomberg GPT, which was trained very specifically on Bloomberg's data, outperforms many other models in finance related tasks without any big reduction in while performing at a similar level across general LLM metrics, right? So you might see things like that emerge where various organizations are creating their own version, having realized the opportunity out there, but wanting to build on their own data. Another thing we might see is a lot of companies that choose to take one of these existing models and fine tune on their own proprietary data to make their own specific models that are going to be incredibly impactful for their organization. This is something that, Snorkel also has been involved with helping a number of customers do that. And so I think ChatGPT is kind of the beginning of the conversation in a lot of cases, but I think there are many more steps and many different approaches that will happen from there as financial companies look to build upon that movement.
Maya, do you want to add on?
Yeah, absolutely. Tools like large language models like ChatGPT and Harshini pointed out accurately, like I agree with exactly what she's saying. You're going to see the bigger players start having their own large language models basically tuned on their own data set. We'll have a separate side conversation of does your org have enough data to even start doing that? The answer is probably no, but that's a separate conversation. You'll see these large language models and generative AI immediately in financial services affect personalization. I mean, this lets you create content and mass personalization at scale. Whereas before you were charging with your marketing team or certain content creation teams, this allows you to accelerate those efforts in a way that you had never thought before. So personalization, content creation, even data querying to a certain extent. There was a question about, data analysis work. There are people that are using generative AI as a way to query data instead of a SQL statement, and a way to have a natural language querying of data that will make data querying more accessible to the organization, which ultimately helps in financial services. But I want to be also really clear on what ChatGPT doesn't do, because I think there's so much hype around what generative AI could be or is or could be in the future when it becomes sentient or whatnot. Let's talk about what it doesn't do. It doesn't make decisions. If you're a financial institution, it's not going to help you review, reject, or accept a transaction, especially at the volumes that you're doing it. It's not going to help you make continuous decisions. It's not going to help you in reinforcement learning scenarios where you want to upskill based on human reinforcement feedback. For example, humans make certain decisions. You want to watch what the best decisioning is and mimic that decisioning at scale. That's not something that LLMs do. And I think there's a lot of confusion right now in financial services and in other industries of what LLMs do versus what run of the mill soccer mom boring machine learning does. And for many financial use cases, we're still talking about kind of boring machine learning versus the generative AI models.
You're right, because we're not all even ready for that necessarily. Funke, I'm curious what you would add on and what you might be doing at Royal Bank of Canada. How has this come to hit your desk?
Yeah, I think thinking about ChatGPT and tying it to my desk, being in the financial service, there's still a lot of discussion around managing. I know we talked on that earlier, the risk around this AI technologies because of the kind of sensitive data that is in management financial service. And like customer privacy is a top priority for all financial institutions. So we are kind of still trying to understand that and trying to navigate how to ensure that customers' data are not just played around with, and not just customers' data, even the internal data of the bank. Well, weaving it back to the discussion, your earlier question around potential, I see it being used around basic tasks, at least, for example, maybe writing minutes of meetings and saving some time in, for all of these basic routine tasks that we do and allowing employees or organizations to focus on much more important activities that need to be done and value added activities. So that's what I see, at least at the minimum in the long run. A lot is still going to happen, like Ashley mentioned. This is just the beginning. There's a lot of potential and there's a whole lot going on. Yeah.
And I think it's important to call it too. If you're in a data leadership role and you're curious about the different use cases, I know back in my consulting days, that's one thing we love doing is just going to show you what you could do, right? So now is the time to call some of those old contacts and let them tell you what's working, what's not, and let them do the song and dance for you, and then compare it with groups. I do think it's really important to be part of professional organizations like Women in Data or the Executive Data Forum, where then we'll bring things like that into the conversation and say, this is what I heard. This is what I heard. Should I do this? Should you do that? What have you learned from it? And just double check that thinking. Cause I was talking to somebody yesterday, even who was part of the data leadership collaborative, who was talking about how almost everything that comes across his desk now from a vendor or consulting firm, he's checking with his professional network of other data leaders to get their buy-in. And that's considered more acceptable now than it was maybe even a couple of years ago. Like, do I do Snowflake or not is kind of a large question. But have you heard of this Copilot, and have you heard of this plugin, and are you doing this? Are you doing that? That's kind of all anybody wants to talk about right now that's in those roles. And so the more you offer up your opinion, the more you can get some opinions back and collaborate. Because again, this is our time together to figure out what's going to work and what's going to stick. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, you can tap on your networks even more now about business decisions than maybe you have in the past, where the conversations have become more on a personal level. We have another question in the poll right now. What are your personal concerns? So I like this one in integrating AI in finance that might fall through the cracks if not addressed rightly. Bunky, do you want to start?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you say
What are
that
your
again?
personal concerns that would, excuse me, what are your personal concerns in integrating AI and finance that might fall through the cracks if not properly addressed? So have you thought of it? Does anything keep you up at night personally where it could go wrong?
Hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it's still going to be about risk management and compliance regulations. Because if it goes wrong, going to be a lot of issues on the and I'm talking about it from a financial institution perspective. So I see that optimizing the potential of AI is actually putting banks in the situation of trying to strike a balance between optimizing innovation and also balancing this regulatory requirement. So that's what I think, like in terms of keeping awake, and that kind of ties to what I said around ChatGPT. In as much as we see that there are a lot of potential, we are also very sensitive in terms of how this is handled, such that we are compliant with regulation.
Harshini, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would say the thing that, most concerns me actually ties things together that Maya and Fuke had said before, which is that given that a lot of this, sorry, is treated with some amount of mysticism, but also to an early point from Fuke, there's a lot of questions about data quality and are you actually using the right data? And, AI has the chance to increase fairness, but also you have to be mindful that, data going in is often tied to biases of the past, tied to, biases that have been there in the data that are studied that, are documented. And so I think there's a very real risk of kind of taking a new model, taking a new system that includes AI in some way, shape, or form and being like, aha, we have the solution to the problem. We're going to kind of defer to this for everything, but not having been sufficiently intentional along the way about making sure you have the right data and also bringing that critical thinking to the outcomes and really thinking about how you want to act upon that data rather than taking it as this mystic, truth that may or may not be delivering what you are hoping it will. So I think that kind of critical thinking, how was it built? Is it reliable? Has it been, debiased, things like that? I think that whole concept is something that is top of mind for me.
I agree. We might just take what it says and take the critical thinking part for granted. Maya, anything?
Yeah, what Fuke and Harshini said was dead on. I mean, what we also have to think about is in practical terms, guardrails and controls. What I think about is, are these companies implementing these systems with a robust set of controls, with a robust understanding of transparency and auditability, especially in financial services? These types of motions are absolutely going to be key because you are accountable, obviously, for reputation, but you're accountable to follow laws. You're accountable to not use certain bits of information, to not kind of codify and amplify previous biases that your organization may have. So I think for me, it's more about what is your organization doing to make sure that those checks are in place from a code perspective, but from a human perspective as well. Like what are we doing to make sure that there's a framework and governance around these systems when they're deployed at scale?
I completely agree. That actually falls right into the next question, which is how do you deal with the skepticism about AI ethics, implementing guardrails, and maybe even maybe even an ethics committee question mark? Um, I'm curious what you guys would say back to that.
Well, I think especially in sensitive scenarios, and you see Europe starting to regulate some of this and starting to talk about this, where it's not just the technology companies and the technologists that need a seat at the table, but sometimes the stakeholders as well of who it affects. And like in lending scenarios, especially in sensitive scenarios like that, how can we make sure that we're having that conversation with communities that, if you have a global lending policy, the communities that this lending policy affects? It's also important in healthcare and in other industries, but in financial services, that's part of the discussion that needs to be had.
Anything to add, Harshini?
I think so. The question also asks how to deal with skepticism around these. And I think one piece of it ties to what Maya was saying. There's a way to also frame this as an extension of there are many realms in which we have already found a need to have these ethics committees or where we have seen problems in the past and there are review boards or things like that. This is a new technology that then kind of folds into any of these areas with sensitive or high impact information that needs to be taken into consideration. And, to kind of think of it as an extension in that sense, I think can be one way to overcome a bit of the initial skepticism. I think another way can be just to point to some of the examples that have started coming out of misuse of a lot of these technologies and to show that the game is changing and there are opportunities, as with any technology in the past, to use it for good or for, more nefarious purposes. And so when something like that happens, you always want to be intentional about the choices you're making. You want to be driving it in a positive direction. And so having the guardrails and having the ethics mindset, whether it's an ethics committee or a review board or something in your design process, however you want to build in that compliance and governance is just a way to help make sure that you are building in the right direction and does not have to be perceived as, and yeah, I think kind of framing it that way can be one way to help overcome some of the skepticism.
Okay, anything you would add?
Yes, so yeah, piggybacking on what Ashni and Maya said, yeah, it's overall going to be about having a governance in place, which is going to be from the inception of deploying these AI models to the point of deploying implementation and also continuous monitoring. And so that we are kind of in check of whatever is going on and wherever we anticipate risk or deviations from the initial objective, then we have a mitigation and controls to prevent all of this from happening. So that's that's what I think. It's just unavoidable, like you mentioned. We need to get into it, and then we just need to manage how we want to take it on and transition gradually.
And ever the optimist and encourager, I have to just say that's also why this is to me kind of an exciting time, right? Because before you might have been trying to talk companies into doing some of these things that you've wanted to do as a data leader in AI. And there was so much skepticism around so much of it and the cost and the understanding and the potential risk versus reward. But now it's going to be table stakes, right? That you're on board with some of these things. So it's kind of good news, bad news, team. The good news is that we can do a lot of this cool stuff. The bad news is you're absolutely right. We should be skeptical about some things. And I want to bring you into that conversation to help drive this forward and see where we want to take the risk and where we don't. So I think it's kind of a forcing function right now to get some of these over the line that then will, once we get past this and AI is not so mysterious, right? Then we can do even more with it. So it's exciting times for sure. Last question that came into the chat here is how is AI going to, I'm sorry, not the chat, the Q&A, because I want to make sure everybody puts it into the Q&A. How is AI going to help these companies and industry meet their diversity and inclusion initiatives and sustainability goals? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
Got crickets here.
I
I mean, listen, and all these goals are about measuring things, right? You have inclusion goals, you have sustainability goals, you have to be able to measure it. What AI is going to do is help them take those measurements and find patterns of success. Because that's ultimately what a lot of AI is kind of pattern recognition and saying, if your goal is X, here's a pattern that can get you to Y. So I think that where we can help in creating better systems that can offer you predictions and decisions in a mechanized way and take all that data that you've been collecting, whether it's about sustainability or DEI or whatnot, and turn that into actionable things that you can do and you can repeat over and over again. That's where it's going to happen in sort of the data to action.
Love it. Anything else?
Well, I agree with Maya. It's all gonna be data driven, just about the inputs into the systems and the outputs. Nothing else comes to mind for me.
Okay.
I think, yeah, the only thing I was going to add kind of comes back again to some of the data quality points that we've been talking about, because I think one of the opportunities that is presented is the chance to start to try to pull some of, human biases out of certain decision-making processes and things like that. But that's a very difficult challenge. And again, extra difficult because a lot of the data that we have has some of those baked in. So, I know there are a number of different ways that you can try to realize that value by trying to catch some of those biases and then create processes to help with decision making that pull those out. So, everything from I've seen cases where looking at data, you can see, I think this was an example that looked specifically at loan data. And for example, women had to make 30% more to be given the same rates. So this is an example I read about, but folks went through and changed the data to adjust for that difference to try to pull that out of it. I've seen examples of, adding an extra parameter in your models that penalizes the model if there's a discernible difference between protected classes at the end. I've seen examples of having more of an adversarial approach where, you have one model that's trying to find examples of not, find contrary examples of differences between protected classes. So I think there are a lot of ways to start pulling these out and help to create less biased decision making processes. But again, I think, there's a lot of work that has to be done to get there.
Completely agree. And I'm looking at the comment from Amara, and I think you're right that says rapid pace at which data generation and AI assisted analytics are advancing potentially are outpacing the development of regulation and ethics. I think that is a concern for sure. And I think staying on top of that, through an ethics committee or other types of ways is probably key. Just because you're right, it's outpacing it right now, and there's only so much we can do about it. What do you all think about the ethics committee idea?
I would just need more details. Like I don't know conceptually it's a bad idea. I just get a little nervous about committees when I don't understand the details of said committee and whether it's a suggestive committee or a regulatory committee. So I think that again, and this is a thorny issue. I mean, the reason you hear so much pause from us on the panel, I think, is because there are no easy answers here. And because when you have a technology that's moving so fast, it's of course going to move faster than the regulation and the kind of ethical considerations around it. Also, because we haven't even thought through all the things we don't know yet. Like, we don't even know in what way it's going to morph and evolve and change into something else, whether it be in finance or in other fields. So I think that's where you hear a lot of pause because there's no easy answers. But even starting a discussion is the right answer.
And I guess maybe to that question of an ethics committee, I would say that I can see the value of an ethics committee for particularly thorny subjects or for very big changes, for things where there are a lot of questions. But to what we've been talking about around the pace at which things are evolving, the fact that everybody becomes a stakeholder in this, I think you also need to make sure that everybody in the company is empowered to make the right decision and knows what that looks like. Because I think most people want to do the right thing. Most people want to build in a conscious manner. But in cases like this, it can be a little bit tricky or to not know the implications. So I think this is where some amount of education, some amount of buy-in, some amount of, company values and things like that. I think all of those become a very important part to building ethically as well. I don't think an ethics committee by itself can be the solution. I think it can be part of the solution, but you'll need a lot of these other components too.
It feels like
Yeah.
the overwhelming. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and just to add on to that, it's I like the idea. I think it's also going to be about getting input from everybody. It's not going to be like we don't have the solution yet. It's just about having the conversation and also continuing to get input from other partners in the business. I know we kind of touched on that. That would actually help because I know there's also this understanding piece in terms of ethical use of this data. So I think it's also very key, and that kind of leads into the data literacy piece. A lot of people do not really even understand these ethical issues. So it's a business for all, like we discussed earlier. Everybody needs to be involved. So not just about the committee in isolation, it has to be the business of everybody.
I agree. And that is exactly the point I was going to touch on. It feels like the overwhelming takeaway from this conversation is that it's not just a data problem or a data leader's problem, it's for everybody. And what comes to mind when I'm thinking about the audience whose questions might be, but yes, how do I do that? How do I convince them? I was just thinking how Sadie and I were at the Knowledge Graph conference a couple of weeks ago in New York. And we were talking about how using my day job's company relationals knowledge graphs as guardrails or knowledge on top of your data can help. And one of the panelists was Pascal from Microsoft. And he said that all he's been doing for the last 6 months, or really the last 6 weeks every day, is executive briefings for financial institutions on how Chat GPT can potentially work in their organization. He's been at Microsoft for 25 years, and he's like, it's just every single one of my banks, which are the top 300 banks in the world, wants to know, wants this executive briefing. And it's dawning on me as we're talking, like how helpful something like that could be for any of you all to bring somebody like that into the conversation and bring the other executives, right? Again, we used to sell software or technology tools to the CTO, and it would just be the CTO getting the briefing. But now you can pull in the entire executive team, and you can use an excuse like having Microsoft come in directly to do that briefing, or whoever it is about whichever tool, but using that as the starting point. So you're not just saying, hey, let's get you all rally together to help me with my problem, because it couldn't seem that way. But hey, I've invited Microsoft in to talk to us all about the benefits and the concerns, and then we can discuss. And I want to hear from you all which initiatives we want to tackle more, and we should go get more information about. That could be a really helpful way of thinking. That's what I'd probably do right now if a challenge with this task of implementing some of these tools into my organization. Any thoughts on that, or final thoughts on what might be most helpful for the audience to make this a group effort?
I think most of it just kind of ties back to the thoughts shared on a similar question earlier of just, you know, bring, like you were saying, bring people into the room, ask people to weigh in, get them to be invested in this themselves, both by having them weigh in, but also by talking about these immense values and opportunities to unlock value across the organization, reducing that barrier, getting over the fear of the unknown by showing people, teaching people, and really getting them hands on with some of these. Because again, it is something that, as we've been talking about, will hit every part of the organization, and so you want everyone to be there on the journey with you because that will make the ride a lot smoother.
Final thoughts, Funke, what you would add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think Ashley touched on it. It's everybody business. We all talked about it. Everybody needs to be involved. Takes the world like an addict to raise a kid. So I think we all need to be involved, and I think that would actually, if people are actually have the feel that they have a stake in a particular project or a particular initiative, I think we get more of their commitment rather than a few people getting into a room and taking the decision and rolling it out. So that would be my comment.
Love that. Maya?
These two brilliant ladies put it best. I have nothing to add for once.
We have like another couple of minutes if anybody does have a last question in the chat. All right, give it another second here. Also, these are the kind of discussions that we have in the Executive Data Forum. Of course, I'm going to plug that again. If anybody wants to sign up, please feel free to do so. All right, well then I will pass it back over to Sadie to close this out. I am so thankful to Funke, Harshini, and Maya for this excellent conversation. I hope the audience was able to take away some key insights that this is not only our only the time for us to shine in these data leaders role, but that it's not just our problem alone, and that we're welcoming people into the conversation. And hopefully you got some key takeaways on ideas on how to do that. But as always, we're happy to answer questions. I put our LinkedIn in the chat. And there's plenty of discussion happening around all these topics in the Women in Data app. That is very cool. That rolled out about a month ago. That's both online and on your phone, where we drive these discussions home. With that, I'll pass it back to Sadie.
Thank you, Aisha. You had a fantastic panel. And I just want to also say a big thank you to Aisha. She is the moderator of the hour. What a fantastic job discussion. And I'm so grateful for everyone's time today on a Friday. Before we wrap up, if you're interested in more events, we have a couple events that will be happening in person this year. We have multiple events happening in person through our chapters, but we are beginning our data series journey in about 2 weeks, starting off in Barcelona, and then we'll be in Nairobi, Kenya. For our US people, we hope to catch you in Washington, DC in August. And then we'll be in Argentina in October and India in November. So again, working to connect our global community, lots of opportunities to connect in person. In addition, Denny just posted a link to all of our events page so you can see our chapter events to connect locally. And then in July, we also have a Women in Data open house. It's a great opportunity to come and learn more about women in data. So again, please stay connected. You know, when I think about women in data, there are few of us in this space, but when we come together in areas like this, we're reminded of how strong we are when we work together and how much opportunity there is to connect, to grow, and to lead in this space. So we hope to see you all at another event soon. And happy Friday, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a fantastic weekend. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.